All right, it's 9:30, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone today. I'm glad you were able to join in today. My name is Jackie Johnson, and I'm the Training and Communications Coordinator with the State WIC Office. Marge Blankenship, our Clinic Services Coordinator, is here today to provide part one of our annual Civil Rights Training. This is a topic that is important to everyone who works in WIC. To ensure that everyone has an opportunity to attend this session, it will be repeated again on September 14th for anyone who could not attend today. In addition, both of the sessions from today and the one on September 14th will be recorded, and we will use the best of the two recordings to send out to any staff who did not have an opportunity to attend the live trainings. And then you will also be able to use these recordings to train future staff who are hired after this point. So be sure to let your WIC director know that you attended this training today so that she can document it in her training files. A copy of the slides was attached to the Zoom calendar invite this morning, so you can grab a copy of that there if you haven't yet. I will be behind the scenes watching the chat, recording the webinar, and we will be pausing occasionally to answer questions throughout the webinar. So feel free to type your questions in the chat, or at that time you can unmute yourself and ask the question that way as well. I am going to go ahead and get things started. And Marge, I think we're ready for you to go ahead and let us know all about civil rights. I always enjoy your presentation on this. I think you make what could be a really boring topic seem really interesting. So I always appreciate how you do this training.
Thanks, Jackie. As Jackie said, I'm Marge Blankenship. I'm the Clinic Services Coordinator here at the State WIC Office. And for those of you that don't know me yet, I've been with WIC for quite a few years. And actually, what a lot of people don't realize is that I actually work and live in Kearney and not Lincoln. So for those of you that weren't aware of that, thought I would share that with you today. So with that being said, let's move to the next slide. USDA requires that we provide this information to you every year. And the reason the reason for that is that WIC is a federally funded program. We get our money from the federal government through USDA. And so that means that we, as a program, and all of the things that we do, we have to follow all of the civil rights requirements that are out there. One of the things that is part of that is that there's what's called a civil rights assurance statement, and that basically says that you'll comply or you will follow all of those civil rights laws and rules that are set up at the federal level. And so that is in the agreement that your agency signs with us here at the state when you get your WIC funds. So essentially, that also means that you have to listen to me once a year and talk about all of this. So today, after we talk and you hear this information, you will learn about collecting the ethnic and racial data about applicants. You'll hear about applying the public notification policy, what that is and how do we apply that. You'll also be able to or know about the procedures that you need to follow for collecting or accepting complaints. You will also be able to learn about what the responsibility is that you have for accommodating people with disabilities, and also learn about the policy of providing language assistance to anyone who is a limited English proficient person, which you'll hear that abbreviated as LEP many times. You'll also know or be able to recognize good customer service, and conflict resolution. Now, I'm going to say I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this time because you'll have an opportunity for more customer service and conflict resolution training later this month, and I'll talk about that later this morning. You'll also know about and be able to talk about or describe the protections that are provided for faith-based organizations. The first part that we're going to talk about today is staff training, and that's what you're doing right now. This counts as part of the staff training. So there is a civil rights training requirement at the federal rules tell us that we have to do and that we have to comply with. And the main one being that there has to be civil rights training completed at least once a year. And you're probably wondering, well, why do I have to hear this? Who needs to be trained? And ideally, or the rules say that anyone who works for the WIC program, so that means all WIC staff, anybody who's new to WIC or volunteers with WIC needs to receive the civil or hear the civil rights training, and then recipients. This pertains mostly right here in Nebraska to Omaha, because they contract out and have sub-recipients. So that would include like One World, Charles Drew, Nebraska Medicine, all of their staff that works with WIC would need to also receive the training. This is a long list of all of the things that they say the civil rights training must include. So if you are not able, or someone from your clinic or agency is not able to listen to the recording or attend the end live, these are all of the things that you would have to be sure that they are trained on to meet that civil rights requirement. And I'm not going to go through all those, they're all listed there, but we will go through all of those pieces today, except for the conflict resolution and the customer service. And as I said, we'll talk about those toward the end this morning. How we do the civil rights training in Nebraska, we break it into two parts. The training part one is really all the policies and the laws and the rules and that part of it. So essentially all the dry things, I get to do that, the dry and boring things. And those include like collection and use of data, the public notification system, complaint procedures and accepting complaints, compliance reviews, resolution of non-compliance, the accommodation for persons with disabilities, and then also language assistance and LAP. So all of those pieces come into this one. The second part of the training that is required is that you need to have some training in addition to part one on conflict resolution and customer service. And want to let everyone know that this year, that training on conflict resolution and or customer service is going to be included in our conference that's being held August 28th and 29th. So there will be opportunities for you to you will be able to meet those requirements if you're attending the conference. Next, we're going to talk about civil rights and discrimination. This is a big part of the civil rights requirements. And, you know, we don't want to discriminate against anybody. We should treat everyone the same in the WIC program. So there's a lot of laws and rules and decisions that have been made and regulations that have been set at the federal level that govern how we treat people and around the civil rights. I'm not going to go through all of these, but because it's a long list, but trust me, there are lots and lots of different regulations that address all the different areas that someone could be discriminated against. The original one is the Title VI, or as everyone knows it as, is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And then you'll see off to the side in blue which of the different entities that rule or that regulation covers. And that first one covered race, color, and national origin. So as you can see, as you look down some of these others, there was one in 1972, 73, 90, another one in 75, 87, a lot of different ones, and there were other things added. So the Age Discrimination Act of 1975, that added age, where before it had been race, color, and national origin. Sex was added in 1972. So you can see that these were added. All of the things that we are prohibited against or for not discriminating against are specified in one of these regulations. The USDA regulations and WIC regulations, which are down toward the bottom, they're the second and third from the bottom. Those are what govern WIC, and you can find information in those. If anyone really wants to dig deep and find all the details, there's the FNS handbook. It's 113-1. It's also, and you want to look at Appendix D also. That has got the specifics on, sort of pulls all those things out of the WIC regulations and all of these other regulations and puts them in one place. So that discusses all of the rules and regulations around civil rights for the WIC program. So if you want to do some dry reading, we take all of that and we take all that and interpret it and put it into procedures to make it easier and say, this is how we're handling this. This is how we're going to address the civil rights requirements in Nebraska. So here are our civil rights procedures from the state side. You can find them on the Nebraska WIC website. These are all of the different procedures that we have. As you can see, policies and procedures. There's one on training. There's one for providing services to disabled persons. Then we get into the public notification, such as the non-discrimination statements that you'll see. There's a policy about serving people who have limited English proficiency and using non-discrimination statements, also collecting data and complaint handling, which if you think about it and you kind of remember that one of that original slide that said, what do we need to train on? All of these pertain to one of those bullets that we have to train on. So we have to train on all of the things, all of those different components, all of those different parts of the regulations. And then we also have procedures that kind of take all that stuff from that previous couple of slides and puts it into one place where you guys can access it and hopefully make it easier for you. Some of the other civil rights resources that we have and that we provide for staff is we have the Civil Rights Quick Guide, which is out there, and I think we attached it. And you know what, now that I say that, I think I forgot to send it to Jackie to attach. So we will send that out. We'll send after the webinar. I apologize. I just realized I did not include that, but it's a real quick guide and we'll talk about it later in this webinar. We also have the Learning About WIC and our training clinic materials that talk a lot about civil rights, the different pieces, and those are out there on the website for everyone to use or look at if you would like to. And then we have our civil rights training videos. This will be one once we choose the best one. Then we'll put that out there. It will also, and we'll use it at Training Clinic, and we will also have it out on our training and business partner site and the training site for staff to use, and then any new staff. So any new staff during the year would watch that video and that would help them meet this requirement. Next slide. So what is discrimination? We all think we know, and I think everyone's heard it over the years. For whatever they do, is you don't want to, you shouldn't discriminate. You don't want to treat people differently. So, what is it? Well, it is the act of distinguishing one person, or it can be a group of people from others. And sometimes it can be done intentionally. Sometimes it can kind of be done by neglect. You didn't even really think about it. Or it can also be discriminatory by the effect of some of your actions that you didn't intend to, you didn't mean, but it had some unintended effects that you didn't think about. And in the converse, it could be actions, or it could be lack of actions, maybe things you didn't do. And it's also based on that person's perceived or actual protected basis. Next slide. So what are those protected bases? Well, it's race, color, national origin, age, sex, and disability. So those are the 6 protected bases for WIC. Now you may hear other bases or that from other programs, but for WIC it is these 6 that we have to think about, and we are prohibited from discriminating or against anyone who is either participating or applying or working with the WIC program or volunteering with the WIC program. Next slide. There was a new change to the protected classes or the bases in 2022. Some of you have heard about this. And that was in the area of sex. That now includes gender identity and sexual orientation as part of that protected class. So instead of just being the gender, male, female, it's now gender identity and sexual orientation. So something to keep in mind that's new within the last year or 15 months. Next slide. So when I said, intentional, unintentional, lack of action, or actions, well, okay, what does all that mean? There's different types of discrimination, and that just kind of alluded to it, but it's pretty vague. So next I want to talk about some of those different types of discrimination. So the first that we get, I think if we get reports, which we don't get very often, and I'm very, very proud of how we work with our clients and the services that we provide, and very, very proud of all of the staff that work with WIC, because we get very, very few, in fact, almost no discrimination complaints. Now, knock on wood, maybe I shouldn't say that very loud, but, or say it out loud, but I really am very, very proud of all that you guys do in the clinics and how you work with all our participants and applicants. But by and large, if we do or when we do get a complaint, it's about disparate treatment. And that is something that they think they're saying they think it's intentional. It's not saying that it was, but they say they intentionally did this, or they're treating me different because of XYZ, and they're doing it on purpose. And that's usually the report that we get. So disparate treatment means it's intentional, you intended to do it, you did it on purpose. Disparate treatment or disparate impact or effect is, and these are terms that the federal language uses. So you may hear this, and I'm just trying to let you know what some of this means. But the disparate impact or effect, that's unintentional. It's a policy or a practice that's put into place at a clinic, and it has like a adverse effect on a group that maybe you didn't intend and you didn't think about. So, it might impact a group of your participants that you didn't think about. And then they're saying, well, they're discriminating against me because. Also, another one is retaliation for prior civil rights activity. And this is if someone has put in a complaint and then you or someone would retaliate by maybe, or they think you're retaliating by making them wait longer for an appointment, or when they come for an appointment, you make them sit and wait longer, or you ask them to bring more proof than maybe someone else would. So that could all be seen as retaliation. Again, I don't think we've ever had a complaint like that. And kudos to all of you, but that's what that means. Next slide. So some examples of discrimination is you could have segregated appointment schedules. One example of that, and this happened quite a few years ago, is a clinic had a translator who was only available on a certain day. They were actually only available like one morning and one afternoon during the month. And so they designated those and they tried to obviously to put all of their, I'm just gonna say Spanish, it wasn't speaking clients, either scheduling them in that morning or that afternoon. Well, unfortunately, someone called, and that one morning was the only time that really worked for them around their schedule to get in. And they were told, well, no, we can't schedule you that day because that's our Spanish day or our Spanish morning. This person did not speak Spanish, filed a complaint, and we can't do that. We cannot hold certain days or times for only a certain group of our participants, whether they be Spanish speaking, Russian, or, don't need an interpreter at all. So that is something that really did happen quite a few years ago. And you can do that, you just don't want to say it out loud. And if that's the only time, you don't want to call your Spanish day or your, I can't even think, your Russian day or whatever. And you also don't want to only have, if someone, that's the only time they can come, then you need to give them an appointment, even if you do have a translator available, and that's understandable. So that would be segregating appointment schedules, and we shouldn't do that. Differences in waiting times, I already kind of mentioned that. You want to be aware, and sometimes it isn't that that it is an issue, it's what people perceive. And if they see someone who's a different race or a different, gender or anything like that, and they see that they're getting in faster, or they typically get in faster and get seen faster, they could see that or think that, well, they're being discriminated against. So be cognizant of that. Let people know in the clinics when they come in that if you're running late, let them know that, hey, we're running a little late today. It's going to be another 10 or 15 minutes. And by doing that, you get ahead of it and you let everyone know that, hey, you're going to be waiting, or you can, and sometimes they don't know. They may be early for their appointment and everyone else is on time, and other people who have appointments are right on time, even though they walked in later. But they think because they came in later that they are actually being taken before them, when in fact that's not true. So sometimes just having the communication with the participants and those waiting in your waiting room goes a long ways toward helping them understand the flow and what's happening. Another one is treating people disrespectfully. I think that speaks for itself. Also, another one is providing different level of benefits based on a protected class. That means giving, someone in one class more benefits than another. One of the things that could come up, or we have heard, is, well, I'm a man and you won't serve me, so you're discriminating against me. Well, not necessarily. We don't, if they have not been pregnant, or if they're not pregnant, they are not postpartum and are not currently breastfeeding, then WIC inherently only serves those adults that meet those classifications. So if they're not in one of those classifications, then we have not discriminated against them. But we have heard that in the past also. Next slide. The one thing that you need to think about with all your clinics is any clinics that might be inaccessible to people that have disabilities. It might be mobility, it might be sight, it could be, is there hearing issues and other conditions. So look at your clinics with new eyes and think about, are there issues with the accessibility and people that may not be current clients, but for other clients that maybe have certain disabilities or mobility issues, or sight issues even, and you may not have a client like that, but how would they be able to access our clinic? Would they be able to move around? Another one is requiring participants to bring their own interpreter or use family, friends, or children. WIC does not, we cannot require that. And we'll talk a little more about that later. But yes, we cannot require, we have to provide interpreters. So we cannot require them to bring their own interpreter or to use family, use friends or children. And then also another one that kind of speaks for itself, I already mentioned a little bit, is asking someone or a group of people to bring extra verification or documentation based on a specific class. Next slide, Jackie. Then also failing to let someone who has limited English proficiency, that an interpreter will be provided by the clinic at no cost. So WIC does need to let them know anyone who doesn't speak English or English is not their first language, or has difficulty understanding English, that an interpreter needs to be provided to them, and there's no cost to them. Again, I know a lot of the clinics do have bilingual staff that speak more than one language, and that's wonderful. That's awesome. And, so then you're not going to have those issues. But if you only have one bilingual person, as most of you know, they're going to need to follow that client to the other part. If it's a clerk, then they're going to have to follow into the CPA area and translate. So just providing someone or translation for one part of the appointment does not meet the guidelines or the requirements. And then another one is locating a WIC clinic in an area that's not accessible to people in certain minority groups. And that could be because of transportation issues, could be because of some other things. And one thing that comes to mind for me is, and I know we do that a lot of times because many times it might be the best location or the only location in some of our smaller communities. But stop and think about who you're serving, if you're serving immigrants, because depending where they came from plays a big factor in how comfortable they might be with the location of your clinic. If your clinic, think about someone who's come from a war-torn country or someone that's like a police state or government, military, and then you put your clinic at the community hall, which is right across the street or right next door to the police station with the police cars, setting out front. How comfortable might someone be who's just experienced that in coming to the WIC clinic when they have that right next? And at one time we had a clinic that was literally next door to the National Guard location. We've had clinics in the National Guard. So those are all things to think about when you're thinking about your clinics and where they're located. Doesn't mean you can't have a clinic in those locations. Just think about the makeup of your clients at the clinic and potential clients. And is that going to have an impact on whether they're going to be comfortable coming to clinic, or they may want to come to WIC at all and apply in the first place? So some things to think about. Next slide. So we've talked about all those things that could be perceived and could be discrimination depending on the situation. So we have a short list, but we do have some things that are not discrimination. And the first one is limiting benefits to children under the age of 5. It could be seen as discrimination based on age, but because the WIC intent and the regulations and the scope of WIC is for children under 5, this is not actually discrimination. And as I mentioned before, not providing benefits to men for under the sex basis is also not discrimination. Limiting certain benefits to pregnant and breastfeeding women. We know, they get more fruits and vegetables, they get the tuna, the fish. Again, it could be seen as discrimination under the sex basis, but it really isn't, because again, WIC's provisions, WIC's regulations, WIC's intent specifies that. So it is not seen as, it is not actually discrimination. So if you hear that, the one thing to remember is if someone, and we'll talk about this later, but if someone wants to file a complaint and says, I'm not getting the same amount of benefits, or a gentleman says, you're not serving me and you're discriminating against me, you do have to accept that complaint. It is not something for you at the local agency to make that determination whether that is if someone says something like that and that it is actually a valid complaint or not, discriminatory complaint or not. It is also not up to us at the state. That is something that USDA makes that determination. So it isn't like we don't trust you. It is just the policy. And we'll talk, as I said, about that later, more later. So next slide. So I guess to summarize all of that is, we're all the same on the inside. So don't discriminate. That's the basis. But there's a lot of different things and a lot of unintentional things that we sometimes don't even think about that someone else may view differently. So we always have to be open-minded. We always have to try and look at things, how our policies are affecting people. As I said, our clinics, just all the things we do, we have to look at those with an open mind and try and think about how those would impact our clients or prospective clients in ways that we maybe aren't aware of and don't think about. So any questions? I know that's a lot, but
I'm not seeing any in the chat, Marge.
See any either. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So next slide. The next area that I want to talk about is racial and ethnic data collection, or just data collection in general. Next slide. All agencies or all WIC clinics and WIC agencies, whether it be a local agency or state agency, we are required to collect data about race and ethnicity on all of our applicants and participants. So not only participants, but anybody who applies, and even though they may be found not to be eligible, we still have to collect that racial and ethnic data. It has to be collected at the time of the application. As I said, we need to know that. So that's the time when we do collect it, and that's when we're required to. Next slide. And you're probably thinking, I get that question a lot. Why are we having to collect this? And it's used, that racial and ethnic data is used in a lot of different ways. It determines how effectively we are reaching all of the potential eligible people in our state. It also helps us identify areas where additional outreach is needed. If we know that there's a lot of potential participants or applicants in a certain area, but we're only serving 5 people from that area. It's like, okay, wait a minute, we need to do some more outreach here. We need to figure out why people aren't coming from this area and signing up for WIC. It also helps us when we have to select new locations for compliance reviews, or it helps us when we're looking at possible clinic sites for the local agencies, for example, just a lot of things like that. Also, one of the biggest rules or reasons is that we have to send that information and provide that information to FNS. So there's FNS reports that require us to show them or get in or provide them with the racial and ethnic breakout and information for Nebraska WIC. Next slide, Jackie. So one thing that's unique with WIC is our applicants get to self-identify. So they can say what race and ethnicity they identify with. But we must inform them. And remember, this is at that initial application or that initial visit. We have to inform them that us collecting this ethnic and racial information is for statistical reporting only. So we have to let them know, yes, that it does, we're only collecting this for statistical purposes, and that the information is not going to have any effect on whether they are eligible for WIC or not. So it doesn't matter what ethnicity, what race they tell us, it's not going to impact their eligibility for WIC. We don't take that into consideration at all. And we need to let them know that when we collect that information or we ask those questions. Next slide. So as you all know, the race and ethnicity categories, it's a 2-question format. We ask the ethnicity first, and we ask the race second. And the ethnicity is a 2-option choice, and the race, there's more than 2. There's multiple choices. Next slide. So the ethnicity choices are Hispanic or Latino, or not Hispanic or Latino. So those are the 2 choices. And as everyone probably knows that has done this in clinic and asked these questions, usually this is the easy part. Yep, I'm Hispanic or Latino, or nope, I'm not. That's pretty easy. If you go to the next slide, Jackie, the racial categories, on the other hand, present some problems sometimes, and isn't always as easy. The racial categories that participants have to choose from are American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian, Black or African American, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, and then white. So there are 5 categories that they can choose from. Now they can choose more than one if they wish, and that is an option. And if they choose more than one, we will accept it, and we mark or we indicate all of the ones that they choose. Next slide. As I said, when we get to the racial categories, a lot of times they'll say, yep, Hispanic, and you'll say what race, and they'll look at you and go, well, I said I'm Hispanic. And it's really difficult sometimes to be able to handle or to know what to say. And I hope this part here, this slide will help. The American Indian or Alaska Native, that is defined as families or persons having origins in North America, South America, Central America, and that they maintain a connection or tribal affiliation. So for a lot of our Hispanic immigrants or Hispanic families that we serve, you can ask them, where are their families from? And, do they still, because there's pockets or areas of those different countries where, everyone is from those original tribes or those original settlers, not the European settlers that came, and that will help them. So they may fall in and actually fall into the American Indian or Alaska Native category, and they're not even thinking about that. Asian is anyone whose origins are from the Far East, Southeast Asia, or Indian subcontinent. Black or African American is Africa. Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders. Hawaii is Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, and any of the other Pacific Islands. White is anyone whose origins are from Europe, the Middle East, or North America. Hopefully that helps you out a little bit more. It still doesn't say, i.e. this country, there's no time frames for how long ago, so that's all very subjective. And again, if someone says, I am, they identify as Black for race, but you don't think they look Black, doesn't matter. It's what they say. They self-report. Next slide. So you're probably wondering, and I get that a lot, why these racial categories? Because they're kind of a pain. They are hard sometimes, especially for our Hispanic clients. Number one, it's a USDA requirement. They tell us what the categories are. Number two, all programs that are funded with federal money, we have to use the same categories. And these are the 5 categories. These are the same categories that are, if you've done the census, anyone's filled out a census, these are the same categories that the census uses. And as I said previously, they're used for data purposes. So like who's using the programs, the effectiveness of programs, and how well are we serving different eligible populations? And if everybody was using different racial categories, there'd be no way for us to look and do any comparisons or see, how we fit or how we fall in with other WIC programs or other states, or evaluate how are we doing. Next slide. There is a racial category tool. Most of you should have this. If you don't, let me know and we will make sure you get it. This is something that you can use with your clients. Again, it just kind of specifies what was on that previous slide, and hopefully will make things a little easier if you have some participants that are having difficulty choosing. Next slide. So again, just to summarize, when you're presenting racial choices to WIC clients, let them know that WIC collects for statistics or statistical purposes only, that their answers, not whatever race or ethnicity they choose, it's not going to affect their eligibility or the amount of benefits that they get from WIC, and that there's no right or wrong choice. The other thing is that WIC, that I want to mention is that if they refuse or they do not want to designate an ethnicity or a race, then we need to do it for them. So you look at them, in total and choose something. And again, there's no right or wrong choice. It's not something, don't struggle over it or feel, oh, what if I make the wrong choice? It's what you see visually, based on appearance, on language, on tone or speaking, just all of those things that you get the impression that they are or are not Hispanic, and in what race they might be. So don't struggle with it. Like I said, for you also, if you are put in a position where you have to make the choice for them, there's really no wrong or right answer. Okay, next slide. So does anyone have any questions? Oh, wait. So I did this slide and I forgot about it. Sorry. If they refuse to choose a race, as I said, then I already talked about visually, but the other things that you could do is ask them where they or their family came from. You could give them 1 or 2 suggestions, did you, what country or what family and then based on what they say, you could say, well, typically people say this choice. If they don't refuse or they're not sure, they don't want to, then let them know that you will have to choose a race for them. So we need to let them know. But as I said, if you have to and you're put in that situation, also not only for them is there no right or wrong answer, there's no right or wrong answer for you either. And then again, make sure and remind them that it won't have any impact. Whatever they choose won't have any impact on their benefits or them being eligible for WIC. So, next slide. So, question. Maria's applying for WIC today for Isabel and Mario. And when you ask her Mario's ethnicity, she says Hispanic right away. And when you ask, well, okay, now we need to know what race. And she says Hispanic. And when you say, well, no, we need to know the race, these are, white or black or Asian, and you go through those. And she seems really confused that you need a different answer than Hispanic. How would you respond to Maria? Think about that. And if someone wants to unmute and tell me how they would respond, what would you say to Maria? We have a volunteer. I'm not seeing anyone. No one wants to speak up today. What you could say to Maria is you could tell her, again, explain to her that, her answer's not going to have any effect on her benefits or her eligibility. You could ask her, well, where's your family from? And then say, well, it could be this or this. Give her some options, ask her some questions to kind of see, to help her decide. If she still doesn't want to, then you can visually make your own choice and let her know that we need to have something filled in and that you'll have to make the choice for her.
Marge, this is Kayla.
Yes, Kayla.
That chart that you showed just like a little bit ago, did it break it out? I know Maite and I have discussed before, like in the past training clinic years, for Hispanic, Latino, there is an actual kind of breakdown that says like if you were originally born in this area and below, you would typically identify as this. And you say this and that, but I don't know that all of our staff know that. So did that say like, if you were typically born in this area, you would probably identify as American Indian or Alaska Native. So when we're guiding them, I don't know that we all know those answers, but I don't think that does it kind of say it? Yeah.
Yeah, it does say that. Yes,
Awesome.
It says origins of, under American Indian or Alaska Native, it says origins of North America, South America, Central America, and maintains tribal affiliation or community attachment. So it doesn't have to be a tribal affiliation. It can be a community attachment. So that's where, all of the community, their village or their town all kind of identifies with that, then where they're from or whether they're, then they would identify as American Indian or Alaskan Native. So
Got it. Yep.
does that help, Kayla?
Yep, that was perfect. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Good question. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, if you think of anything, just go ahead and put it in the chat as we talk. You think, oh, I should have asked this. Just put it in the chat and we can always come back to it. So next we're going to move on to, next slide, Jackie, to limited English proficiency, which as I said earlier, is many times referred to as LEP. This also includes national origin. So what are the LEP requirements? I'm sure a lot of you don't know what those are. They require that agencies and subrecipients are required to take reasonable steps so that WIC, access to WIC by persons with limited English proficiency, oh goodness, now I can't say it, or LEP, it has to be meaningful access. So it means that they have to understand, someone who's LEP or has limited English needs to understand the information. It's not just good enough to hand them a piece of paper and say, oh, yep, we gave them the information. They have to actually understand it. So that's pretty much the bottom line of the LEP requirements for WIC. So next slide, Jackie. So what are some of the considerations for providing language assistance, and when do we need to provide that? The first and foremost is the number and proportion of LEP persons served or countered in your eligible population. So it's not just the number you serve, but it's the proportion of persons who you encounter or who live in the areas that you serve that may speak that language or are proficient in that language. Also, you have to take into consideration, what is the frequency of LEP persons contact with the program? So how often do you have contact with someone who speaks a specific language or is, and that may struggle with English? Then again, also you need to consider is the importance of the service. How important is the service that's provided? So if we're trying to talk to somebody about breastfeeding, but they can't understand us and they're breastfeeding for the first time and they're having issues, that's pretty important. So we need to have an interpreter that can interpret for us, if you know, thinking as one example. And then we also have to consider it's not just all of this, also the resources available and the cost is part of the consideration or part of everything, the whole picture. But the resources available and the cost cannot be the only consideration. It can also not be the primary consideration. So we can't make decisions based only on cost or availability of translation services or interpretation services. Next slide. So how do we meet those LEP requirements that are out there for WIC? In the state of Nebraska, we must have materials provided in Spanish, which we do. We have to use a written translation for our forms and materials, and we have to have oral language services available. This could be a language line, it could be interpreters, it could be bilingual staff. As part of that, the other piece that is also sign language or Braille. And, you know, those are things we don't always think about, but we have had those sometimes, the need for those in some of our clinics. Next slide, Jackie. So the next section I want to talk about is the protections that WIC has or that WIC needs to be cognizant of for people with disabilities or those that we are serving with disabilities. Next slide. So disability definition is defined as anybody who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. They also can have a record of such an impairment, or they can either have a record of having that impairment or is regarded as having that impairment. Next slide, Jackie. So definition of a major life activity is it's any kind of function or anything that's needed that you have to be able to do or someone has to be able to do to care for their own self. So it could be walking, it could be hearing, breathing. So someone that has to carry around oxygen tanks, there's on a ventilator, working, performing tasks like cooking or just dressing themselves or bathing. All of those things are considered major life activities. So if there's something that's affecting one or more of those, then that could be seen as a disability. Next slide. They did expand the definition of disability and to include immune system, all of these things. So you can see this was done in 2008 as part of the American with Disability Act amendment. And so they broadened it to lots of different things that unfortunately, sometimes these things are all we can't see them. So we're not always aware. And just because we're not aware doesn't mean we don't have to, again, look at clinics, look at the way we provide services to take into consideration some of these things because they aren't visual. We can't see them. Next slide. So reasonable accommodations, and that's what the ADA says, that we need to make reasonable accommodations. This is required that all WIC clinics and programs do this. So when we choose a WIC clinic, the things we need to look at is the parking lot. Does it have a lot of potholes? Is it easily, can people use strollers? Can they use a wheelchair? If they were having to bring an oxygen tank with them because they're on oxygen, is it easy to get? Is it, like I said, is it easy to get from the parking lot in? Where are the entrances and exits? How easy are they to get in and out of? Do they meet ADA guidelines for being wide enough for a wheelchair? We always think about strollers and things. They have to be just a little wider for wheelchairs. So, it's the same thing. Think about restrooms. Where are they located? Are they accessible? Can they get into them? Can they get out? Same thing, are there elevators if they're a building that is, if you're in the basement or you're up on a second or third floor? And in the hallways, are they wide enough? If they're wide enough, is there a lot of stuff put in them that would cause issues? So there's all of those things to think about, the physical locations or the physical part of the clinic. And then also, as I mentioned, always think about sign language and Braille services. So it does say, the law says that we have to make reasonable modification. So what would some of those be? It would be, potentially to allow service animals. So we have to allow service animals in our clinic if someone has them. We need to have qualified and competent sign language interpreters, Braille signage, or maybe it wouldn't need to be Braille. It might just have things in large print. They might just need things printed larger so that they can see them and read them. Alternate arrangements for service, and their clinics need to be wheelchair accessible. So we have a client situation here. You have a new family that called for an appointment. Grandma is the one who's calling, and she tells you mom is deaf. This is the only family in all of your clinics that you currently have or that you've ever had who's ever had a member who's deaf and is hard of hearing. So what should you do before the appointment? And there are 4 choices. Ask them if someone can come with mom, like ask grandma, she can come with mom to sign. Do nothing, have the staff speak slowly and use hand gestures to communicate with mom. Find and have a sign language interpreter available for the appointment. Or D, use printed materials, because this is the only client we have or have ever had who is deaf. And what option do you think that you should use? Okay, well, people just want to put in the chat what you think the answer would be. Okay, I'm seeing lots of C's, but C is the correct answer. Find and have a sign language interpreter available for the appointment. Sign language interpreters are not always the easiest to find, but there is a hard of hearing and deaf commission here in Nebraska, and they can help you locate sign language interpreters. So if you run into that, and I would recommend that maybe you reach out to them and have someone that in your area that you can use, or a couple of people, so that if this ever happens and you do have someone, that then you don't have to scramble or go look for someone. You at least have a contact, or if there is anyone available. And we have had clinics that we have had to use. We have had to use sign language experts or signers for those appointments. And there was a question about Braille, and no, at this point, we do not have materials in Braille. That is a good question. And this is another situation, and this is from a clinic's standpoint. The only location you can have a WIC clinic in this community, it's in the basement of a building and there's no elevator. So what could you do to serve clients with a physical disability at this clinic? Because it's kind of a far flung, there's a group of people, or there's a pocket of participants that really don't have a lot of transportation. So how would you handle this? And again, let's put your answers in the chat. A is help them or carry them up or down the stairs to the clinic. B is ask the client to go to the next closest WIC clinic. C is find an area on the ground floor WIC can use temporarily for clients with disabilities. And D is move the clinic to another community. What do you think? Hey, I'm seeing lots of C's again. And that is right. If you can, you should try and find an area that, and most places would have a room or an area that you could use on the ground floor temporarily for clients with disabilities. So if you could do that, then that, you could continue to work with that or have that clinic, and you would be meeting the requirements. But under no circumstances should we ever try and help someone up and down the stairs who's not, has a disability, or to carry them. And we can ask them to go to the next closest clinic, and they may, because maybe they go to the doctor or something. But if that's not possible, the best answer is to find that other area or find a temporary spot in the building on the ground floor that you can use. So I want to talk about this. This is kind of a little known or not talked about much area of the civil rights area, and it's protections for faith-based organizations. So what does that mean? It means, and it's a good thing, it means that WIC can use space in churches and temples and synagogues, mosques, or any other faith-based buildings, and we don't have to, or they don't have to, remove any religious art or symbols during clinics. So yes, that makes it really nice, because we do have so many of our clinics in our small communities that are in churches or temples or other buildings that are affiliated with faith-based organizations, and it would be really hard to go in and remove all of that. So that's one of the really nice things that this was added, and the biggest part about that you would be affected by. So, and there was a comment in the chat. Let me go back to that. Okay, someone just said, we have been lucky in the past where we have had a client who is visually impaired who has had someone to help with appointments. Do you suggest doing that in the future if we do not have WIC material for a client who's visually impaired? And that is yes, you can do that. If they do not have anyone, then you probably would need to reach out to us here at the state office, and we would see what we can do. And if they have someone who can help them, then that is okay. It's kind of like translation. We have to provide it. When we talk about translation or interpretation into other languages, we have to provide it without charge. But if they have someone that is typically helps them, or then we can use that. Or if they insist that we use the person or persons that they have. Oh, any questions about any of it? And I just read the one chat. I skipped this one. Hey, public notification. This is one that you probably have been part of, or you may have done some of this and you didn't even realize it. So we're going to talk about a little more detailed about this. Next slide. So what are the components of the public notice? First of all is outreach. All of the outreach we do to let people know about WIC in our communities that we serve. Second is displaying the Injustice for All poster. As I said, you've probably already done public notification or public notice, and you didn't even know it. And yep, you put that public or that Justice for All poster. You make sure that's in the clinics and the waiting areas. Using the non-discrimination statement on materials and websites. Another one, providing information in other languages and formats, showing diversity in messaging and images. That means that you should show diversity, not have of everyone that you serve or everyone that's in your service area. And then notifying clients of clinic days, times, and locations. And that includes any changes to your clinics. So outreach. what at a minimum do you need to know, do? So once a year, you need to notify the public and participants of any changes to your clinic days or hours, and also what your clinic hours and things are. So you can do a annual media release that talks about the WIC eligibility criteria, the program, the benefits of WIC. You can provide, and also provide the address, the days and hours of your clinics in your service area. And then when you do this piece, you need to include the non-discrimination statement as part of that. So if you do that, that will do a media release. Now it can be a media release, it can, and in the day and age of social media, it can be on your website, posted on your agency or your WIC website. There's a lot of different ways, we say media, but it doesn't have to be a newspaper. It could be, which we traditionally, those of us that are older think about newspapers all the time, but there is the social media options also. And this needs to be done once a year for your clinics in your counties that your agency serves for WIC. Another one that I mentioned is the Injustice for All, the discrimination poster. And again, it has to be prominently displayed. I think you've pretty much always all heard that. We have to show it and have it displayed in our WIC clinics and also administrative offices for WIC. The current poster that we're using is dated September of 2019. Here's a snip of what the top looks like. It is green. It has the building on it with a flag. Just to let you know, you heard this last year. Last year when they changed, I already talked that they had changed and added to the gender identity and sexual orientation. That is reflected in the non-discrimination statement. But we have not gotten the new posters yet. USDA is still working on those. So you need to still use those ones that are dated 2019. We will be getting, I've heard that they are getting close to printing the new ones. We do have an order in here at the state, and as soon as those have been printed and they are available, USDA will send us a supply, and then we will send them on to the clinics or the local agencies. So just be patient. We will get those to you as soon as we receive them. And in the meantime, keep using those ones that I showed that has the building on the front and are dated 2019. That's the one that needs to be posted and needs to be in clinics and offices, administrative offices, until we get the new ones. So a non-discrimination statement, there's the new one that came out last year. It is required to be placed on anything that that's print or electronic, that has an outreach message or any information about WIC benefits or services. So that's the standard. It has print or electronic, so it needs to be on your websites, because your websites contain information. It talks about, outreach, and also usually they have information on benefits and services. It is not required on nutrition education materials as long as they don't talk about WIC benefits or services specifically. There is a short version, and that can be used on small items such as postcards, just like really small, because anyone that has seen the actual statement, it's fairly long, and we don't want to have to add additional multiple pages or not be able to have a half sheet and have to go with a full sheet or 2 sheets because we have to put the long phrase on there. So that's part of the consideration. If you have any concerns about whether you can use the short one or the long one on something, just send me that, email me a sample and ask, or give me a phone call. And we'll look at it and figure it out for you. So in light of this new statement, non-discrimination statement, We did send the long statement to directors, so everyone should have that. We sent it last summer in June. So if you do not have a copy of that, it is on our website. And if you want one that you can use to cut and paste or do whatever, just let me know and I can send it to you. The short statement remained the same. It did not change. I made the, there are a couple things that are in process at the state office. The participant rights and responsibilities, laminated copies are coming soon. We'll be sending those out. We're also going to be sending out an updated, I think it's a little short summary one. I can't remember what it's called. I was going to include a snapshot of it on this slide and I forgot, so I apologize. But those will be coming soon, probably not before the conference, probably in September. We have here at the state office, we have a lot of things that we need to take care of before the conference. So it'll probably be in September that you will be seeing those. As I said, again, the civil rights posters also, we are still waiting on those. And as soon as we get them, we'll send them out to you. And then, so I talked about how images must reflect diversity. And as I said, think about your the people who are in your service area, think about who you could be serving, you might serve, and use images like that. And don't just think about races but think about gender, think about disabilities. All of those things could be a factor in when you're looking at images that you could use in your materials. So, next slide. Which of the following, so we have this poll, which of the following can you use the short non-discrimination statement on? A postcard with details about who can apply for WIC. B, half sheet with WIC information about it, on it. C, a social media post. D, an education brochure. E, A, B, and C, or F, all of the above. So again, we're going to have you put it in the chat. And what do you think is the correct answer? This one does have, yeah, we have more options for you to think about. Right? Got a couple different answers that everybody, was divided between. Majority, good, that's a good one. Okay, this one was maybe a little tricky. Remember when I said I was going through the list and I said of what needed to have or what could use the short statement. One of those things that you didn't need to put a statement on at all is any kind of education materials that do not talk about benefits or that doesn't have any outreach and doesn't talk about benefits of WIC or like our foods or what we provide. So let's say those Help Me Be Healthy brochures. They don't have anything specifically about WIC on them. So they don't need to have anything on them. I believe they do, but I can't remember if they do or not, but they don't need to. So any education brochure. So when you look at these questions or these options, the correct answer would be A, B, and C. A lot of people, a lot said E, a lot said F. So you don't have to, it's okay if it is on the education materials, but it's not required. So if you do something about iron or picky eaters, for example, you would not need to have any non-discrimination statement on it, whether it be the long or the short. So keep that in mind. But all of the others, the social media post, the half sheet with WIC information, or a postcard with details about who can apply for WIC, all of those would need to have the short statement. And the reason for the short statement versus the long one is because those are all very condensed, they're very small, and the large statement would make you have to make them significantly larger. If you can imagine putting the long, and those that you haven't seen it, but those of you that are familiar with the long statement or the full statement, it would probably be longer than what your social media post was and would distract from the content and what you're trying to let people know about in your post. So that's kind of a way to make that determination if you're not quite sure. But as I said, if you're not sure, give me a call or send me an email and we'll figure it out. So great answers. Thank you, guys. And any questions? I don't think, there weren't any, were there, Jackie? I don't think so. Don't see any.
I don't see any questions.
Okay, we're going to move on. The next area I want to talk about is complaint procedures. And many times when we get a complaint, the person's not happy. So, that it takes some tact, takes some patience. And as I said, we have to accept those complaints. So even though it may not be uncomfortable or the person may be really upset, and you should also have a process where can anyone take the complaint, or would they rather that only maybe the clinic coordinator is the person who takes those, who talks to the participant or the person and does the complaints. And there's no right or wrong. It's just that they need to be able to submit a complaint at any time and any type of complaint. So next slide. So these are our complaint procedures. As I said, I think everyone does an awesome job. I've been doing this civil rights for a long time and dealing with the complaints, and we very rarely get a discrimination complaint, and that is wonderful. I think that speaks to the great service and how you treat our participants and applicants for everybody across the state. So thank you all, and kudos to all of you. But despite all of that, we do get complaints, and people do feel they've been discriminated against sometimes. And as I said, everyone has a right to file that complaint if they feel that they've been discriminated against. All of our staff need to know what to do if somebody wants to file a complaint. You may not be, as I said, at your clinic, the person who is going to take that complaint, but you need to know what the process is and how you process or who does at your clinic. Everybody should be aware. Next slide. So someone can file a complaint for any of those 6 protected classes that we talked about when we started the training today. Complaints can be written, they can be verbal, they can have the person's name on them, or they can be anonymous. So all of those. As I said earlier, you do not, or the agent, or anyone at the local agency does not determine whether it's discriminatory and whether they apply to WIC. We here at the state don't determine that. Everything we get that's discriminatory, a possible discrimination complaint, or if someone says they feel they've been discriminated against and you get that, you send it to us, we send it on to USDA. So we don't keep that. Next slide. So as I said, these discrimination complaints, since they do go to USDA, and again, they're regulatory, so they do have some specific guidelines. They have to have complete information. They need to be signed by the complainant or the representative who's making the complaint, and they have to be filed within 180 days of the date or the time when the action that they're complaining about or or that it did happen. So it has to be within 180 days. Next slide. Again, any discrimination complaints that you get, they have to be submitted or sent to us here at the state office within 5 days. You can email them, you can send them by fax, probably wouldn't recommend mailing them right now because mail takes much longer than 5 days. So email is really the best. You would submit those to either myself or Peggy Troba. You can also send them to Diane Clifton, our local agency engagement manager. So all 3 of us you could send them to one of us or all of us, and we will process them. We'll make sure USDA gets them, because that's what we do. Then we take those and we have to send them to the appropriate person in place within USDA. Next slide. So how would you do that? We have the program integrity screening form. There's a link here and a form that shows the form. There is one area, it's over in red. And that has check number. This is an old form yet. I wanted to get it updated and I haven't gotten that done just yet, but I will be working on that this fall. So you can ignore that where it says check numbers. That's old, and it tells you how old, because we haven't had checks for quite a few years. And this is one of those forms that kind of slip through the cracks. We keep forgetting to update it, but we will get it updated. This is a form that you use. It has all of the information. You can just fill this out. You can fill it out. It is fillable, so you can type in it, you can print it and handwrite it. You can give it to the person and they can fill out the detailed description and the their name and everything. Even if they want to remain anonymous, let them know that yes, they can be anonymous. But it's very helpful to have their name and address and phone number, any contact information, because if the person who's investigating has any additional questions or wants to clarify something, there's no way to do that if we don't know who to talk to. So that would be the only reason that their name would or information would ever be shared with anybody or used, is if we needed to get some more information. And it's really helpful to let them know that. Sometimes they, they say anonymous and they don't give any of that information. And then we're not able to really make a decision, or USDA isn't able to make a decision because they don't have all the information. So one point to keep in mind. Next slide. The other one here is it just circle is showing this on the second page, which has all the steps that need to happen with these complaints, and you would designate they would tell you which of the bases they think that they are being discriminated against. Sometimes they don't know, and you need to make that determination based on what they've told you. But keep in mind, as I circled in the sex, is that this would also include that gender identity and sexual orientation. So next slide. So again, we have a golden rule for complaints. Don't ever discourage anyone from filing complaints or from voicing any allegations of discrimination, and accept all of those complaints and listen to those. That's kind of the golden rule. And if you do that and submit those and listen to them, you will be fine. Hey, I have a couple of situations here. We're not going to go through them, but I wanted to put these out there. There's two different ones, this first one, and then there's the second one. And I want you to take these back to your clinics. And during a staff meeting or on your drive to a clinic in some morning or on your drive home, talk about these, go through these, talk about these. And there are two questions for each of them that I want you to think about and talk about with your coworkers on these two situations. And Jackie, if you want to go to the next slide. The two questions are, would you consider these examples a discrimination complaint? Do you think they would be a discrimination complaint? And if yes or no, then why? And then looking at both of these, and if these happened at your clinic, what would you do differently, or what could you do differently at your clinic if this happened? Sorry guys, I forgot my phone was not on mute. So I apologize. But what would you do or could you do differently at the clinic to prevent this happening in the future? These are the kinds of things that we kind of need to think about, and in light of our clinics and how we schedule and how our clinics operate. So this is homework. for all of you. So if you want to go to the next couple slides, Jackie, pass these. So I included them in here so that you would have them. And next slide. I believe, there we go. So when you get a complaint, things to keep in mind is to thank them. It's hard to do sometimes, and depending on how angry they might be or upset, but always remember to thank them because they are our customers for complaining and really mean it. Don't just, oh yeah. But because the thing is, most people won't ever bother to complain. They're not going to complain. They're just going to walk away or never come back. And so those that complain, we do need to thank them because otherwise we would never know that that's something that's upsetting some of our participants and potentially keeping them from coming back and getting our services. So next slide. So now I want to talk about part two. That's it for part one. It's like, phew, we got through it. Part two, for our training of the civil rights training in 2023. This will be met by, there are 3 different sessions during the WIC conference that can be applied as part 2 of the required civil rights training. The 3 sessions are exceptional customer service, how to talk about food, best practices for culturally appropriate conversations, and skills for handling workplace conflicts. So if you attend the conference and you attend, which everyone will, I think one of those sessions is a breakout session, but the others, so there will be an opportunity for everyone to attend at least 1 or 2, I believe 2, or 3 of these sessions, and you will meet the training requirement for part 2 for this year. Anyone who's not able to meet or not able to attend the conference, and we do have a very few people for issues such as maternity leave or a couple of other things that aren't going to be able to join us, they will need to have and attend some other customer service or conflict resolution training before September 30th in order to meet the civil rights requirements for this year. So any questions? This concludes the training. You've all made it. We got through it. All that dry stuff. I will let the directors or coordinators know that they need to record the names of everyone who attended along with today's date, and that they attended the training. Anyone who is going to attend the second training on September 14th, I believe it is, then you can all put that on the same page or in the same file, but just maintain who attended and what dates. And then if you have some staff that are not able to attend either of the live ones, but watch the recording when we provide it, then you would need to keep a list of those names and that they watch the recording, and you would need to document what date they watched the recording. And then your documentation should be complete, and you should be okay for your civil rights training for this year. Do you see any comments or questions in the chat, Jackie?
I'm not seeing any questions
Okay.
yet, but one that I was just thinking of, could you give some examples that tell like kind of what's considered prominently displayed and what's not considered prominently displayed?
Okay. Like prominently displayed would be on the wall in your waiting area, because you've got clients sitting there, they're going to be able to see it. Some clinics are not able to put anything, like again, our travel clinics that travel around are not able to put anything on the wall, because that's, the site, the church or the community hall doesn't want them to do that. So what they can do is they can put it in a frame. I've seen that, and then that's set on the registration table or on the sign-in table or something. The frame, the poster is required to be a certain size. It has to be 11 by It's 13, 14, something like that. It's a standard, it's a size that's required. It's set up in the regs. So it's bigger. It's not an 8.5 by 10. So it's going to be a bigger frame that you would have to put it in, but you can do that. Others lay it on the table where people sign in or where they do show their proofs and things. So those are two examples. Another prominent like might be the front entrance of a administrative office, or if there's multiple programs in that area and there's a WIC area, you might then put it in the front area where people walk in to the WIC area. So those are just some examples. It can go on walls, it can go in a, stand up in a frame, it can be laying there. And Diane, do you have any? She's here with me,
No,
so
I think that those are all very good suggestions, and just keep in mind that it is a requirement, so the better job you can do of displaying it so that it's accessible to all the participants or anybody who walks in, the better visibility, the more you'll be in compliance with that regulation.
And just to let you all know, which I did not mention when we were talking about the poster, and I'm so glad you asked that question, Jackie, is that once the new posters are available, we are also ordering, I also ordered Spanish versions, so you will get English and Spanish. There are other language versions available on FNS's website. So when we get the new posters and we know that they're out there, they don't always get all those translations done at the same time. I'm hoping because of the delay this year or this time that they will have those in place, and then I will get you the link to that. So if you need in another specific language and you have a large population or participation in another language, you can go get that or find that just non-discrimination statement on their website, and you can print it out. So I will provide that information when we send the posters out too, if it's ready to go, or as soon as it is ready to go, I'll let everyone know. So that is another option where you can get it. They have, I think there's like 20 or 30 languages at least that it's available in. Thanks, Jackie. Any other questions? Hey, if not, just one thing I want to share. I love this quote. It's from Martin Luther King, and it says, "We may have all come on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now." And I think that's really good to remember, that everybody comes from different places and that can be very, very different than ours. But today, at this moment, we're all in the same boat. So just to keep that. And then also this quote from Helen Keller, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And those are two of my favorite quotes. So just wanted to share those with you. And that's all I have for today. So thank you all for being patient and listening to all of this. I hope everyone learned at least one new thing or had something, oh, I forgot about that. That's right. Moments. So hopefully everyone had that. And as I said,
Yes, and thank you, Marge. That was a great presentation and a lot of information for everybody to kind of think about. If you have any further questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, if you have no questions, just go ahead and type your name in the chat so that it records that you were here. Thank you and have a great day.